Welcome to the Mosaic Lounge, Mosaic Health, mental health series provided courtesy of Melanin Mosaic Performance Ensemble. We are here today with Courtney Allyson Mills to present Self-Awareness, a space for growth and recognition. How are you, Courtney?
I am so good, and I'm so excited to talk about this today. This is a big one for me in terms of, essentially how we show up in the world. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited. How are you?
I am good now that we're here. I cannot lie. This is the first time we've done anything like this. As you know, Melanin Mosaic is just a year old, starting May 1st. And it's been a huge thought to bring something else to the entertainment industry and performance industry, marching arts entertainment industry, all that stuff that presents something besides the body, because we are all doing the same thing, same skills, etc. But we're all dealing with different personalities and mental health issues or just emotions constantly. And we don't have all the resources that we should have to even begin the conversation of mental health and wellness and awareness. So I'm just honored to have you here. Let me quickly just go over this real quick before I just go anywhere else. You are a movement educator, choreographer, performance consultant, education coach, director of education for the Breakdown Camp, which is the premier movement camp geared toward the marching arts performers, and a Box 5 Media BOA broadcaster. That's just the surface. Anything else you want to add?
I'm an amateur golfer, a cat mom, and I have entirely too many plants.
If I were to just go through this house, you'd be like, oh, nope, you got it. Uh-huh. Rack. The rack. You've seen the back. Plants, windows, plants up there.
Oh, I see them. Don't think that I haven't been looking.
Yeah, that my husband is a plant person. I love him for having that, because again, plants even are a huge source of mental health and recent years to a lot of people, especially during COVID times. And it doesn't stop. It's like a living person that you have to water and feed and take care of, and not just kill in the corner and let it die and like, oops, that was that. So just like a human or a cat. We have a dog.
They provide clean oxygen in your space. So I have found that before plant, the BP, Courtney, maybe my space wasn't as oxygenated as it is now, because the overwhelming amount of plants have provided me with fresh air all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't live in a. I'm like, I need a little bit of fresh air. So I'm glad he does it, but it's an obsession of his, and he loves it. I love it. I don't complain. It looks pretty in the house, but yeah, it really is good.
Yeah, and it is great. You're absolutely right. It's great for mental health. I'm one of those people that picked up the plant stuff, during COVID, because at the time I was living in Colorado, and it was just me and my animals in a condo, and I didn't have anything else. So I was like, okay, like what else can I do? And it kind of became, all right, well, my new hobby is plants. So.
Well, we're glad you took on a hobby.
Me too. So I'm really glad that you had me on today. Self-awareness for me has been, first of all, it's the first part of the wheel of social emotional learning. And social emotional learning is essentially, I liken this to Sesame Street. Like it's literally all the things we learned when we watched Sesame Street as a kid or any of those children's programs. So self-awareness is the top of that, because it is the thing that we're the only ones that can be self-aware in this. So within the wheel, let me see if I can get here. Within the wheel of social emotional learning, and it is a wheel because it goes all the way back around to the center. It is one of those things that should be cultivated by the people around you. And what's happening is we're not, as a society, cultivating this within children, and especially when it comes to social media. So, yes, because a lot of people, this is ridiculous, but I mean, I'm sure people that watch this later are going to be like, oh, I totally do that. But a lot of us look into social media as we're scrolling and we're like, oh, these are all these things that I'm liking, I'm commenting, I'm engaging with these people. And now what we're seeing is this younger generation sees that and they think, oh, people are paying attention to me. Mm-hmm. So the attention they're thinking is self-awareness is their presence online and not necessarily their presence and essentially like their lives, like in real life.
Makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Dude, tell me about it. So self-awareness, I liken this to, so I've done this presentation a couple times, one for USA Gymnastics. And self-awareness, I like to liken to using a blinker. So most of us, hopefully a lot of you drive or you've been in a car and maybe the person driving or yourself has gotten frustrated because somebody is not using their blinker and you're like, you get mad and you don't know why you're getting mad. You just get mad because it's inconveniencing you, right? Because you have to slow down or you have to stop or it just gets in the way. So when you use a blinker, you are telling the people around you your intention. Using a blinker is self-awareness in recognizing that you are not the only person on the road and that others need to know your intent in that moment, in that present moment. Are you turning right? Are you turning left? Or are you just slowing down to make me mad? Right? So this idea of self-awareness and the blinker situation, usually when I say that, people are like, oh yeah, totally. In one of my last presentations, one of the ladies was like, my husband never uses his blinker. And I'm like, well, you may want to have a conversation. So essentially going back, there are 5 components of social emotional learning. Today, we're going to look at self-awareness. Then it goes into self-management. And then it goes into responsible decision-making. And then it goes into relationship skills. And then it goes into social awareness. So it starts at that self-awareness and ends in the social awareness. So recognizing yourself in the world and how you relate and how you affect other people is a massive discovery that takes work and practice and a deeper conscious thought in terms of being present. Self-awareness is one's ability to accurately recognize their emotions, thoughts, values, and how they influence personal behavior and how they influence what's happening around you. So I'm going to go into this in terms of like color guard, right? Or marching band or something that's a team activity. When we talk about people that we are on that team with, especially the younger people, they're not understanding of how being late or, getting a phone call or something that's kind of a distraction. They don't understand that that's not just a them thing. They don't understand that those things, those moments are moments where absolutely we are seeing this lack of almost respect. And I don't know that it is intentional. I don't think it's intentional. It's really just a lack of understanding of how you affect the people around you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. There is so many times where even as adults, we forget that we are not alone in this world and our choices, whatever they might be, have an effect on someone else's choices, But if we're always in our own little bubble, not expecting or not respecting that idea, it becomes chaos. And that's what you start to get when you have those moments where, like you said, blinker, no one's doing a blinker. And next thing you know, you're turning your wheel and now you have a pile of cars behind you because you weren't thinking, oh, my choices affect more than just myself in this vehicle. It affects people 3 miles, 4 miles back, 10, 20 miles back, people who haven't even on the road yet. So those, yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, and the aspect of self-awareness that I'm really interested in is as not just as humans, because I feel like all of us have a responsibility to do the work and to figure out where, truly what we want and how we want to show up in the world every day. But you can't do that until you recognize who you are, your behaviors and your habits and the things that make you you. You have to kind of recognize where that sits and how comfortable you are in that. Because if you are not, then you're kind of putting out different signals, I think as we grow older, and again, I know that you're in your 20s. So I think as we grow older.
Who's in their 20s?
I was waiting for you. I think as we grow older, we start to recognize and we start to be more self-aware because we have to start focusing more in. And Absolutely. When you're younger, you're continually focusing out because you're wanting to find what you gravitate towards. You're wanting to find yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's so much so when we teach adolescents, high school kids, even up into the college age kid, those kids are constantly out and they're reaching and they're trying on different personas. They're trying on who they want to be, and I think that as you get older, you're like, oh yeah, this is who I am. And that self-awareness aspect of it really does matter in the long run, especially when we teach it.
Yes, totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think that the sooner we can open eyes to all of the things. Okay, let's just give an example. So I march color guard, I march winter guard. And let's say this is an example because I was never late because I would get yelled at and I didn't like being yelled at. So I was never late, but let's just say I was late. Let's say that I'm 20 minutes late and I walk into rehearsal and I just kind of like put my stuff down. There's really not a whole lot of urgency. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, I'll just jump in. What I don't know is that they've already gone to a part of the show that I needed to be in order to clean. And once I arrive, everybody's like, we have to do this again. I don't see that. I just see myself coming into the space and going to do my job. I don't recognize the fact that my action of being late has completely affected 25 other people in not just their process and procedure of what they're doing, but now they're all a little pissed. And so all of a sudden, this emotional cloud kind of gets on and then you're like, I don't get it. And you don't realize when you're younger that those moments are the moments that are the kind of the backbone of how we build teams. So again, I said I was never late when I marched in real life because I wasn't. And it wasn't because I knew that was the outcome, but it was because it was just my job to be there on time, right? But I didn't know until later. Like you don't come into that knowledge until way later. So recognizing where you're at within your life and within your own timeline is imperative for the other people around you and how you affect them. When I think about being an unselfish person, I think people don't recognize that being unselfish means truly taking into account every single person that you're coming into and how your vibe, everything about you affects them. And it goes along the lines of that self-discovery of self-awareness and how that fits, especially within our 5 components of social emotional learning, because that self-awareness goes right into self-management. Can you think of a time when you were impacted by self-awareness, or that somebody else maybe impacted you?
As a general statement, I became self-aware very young doing drum corps, because it was on me somehow, my personality or whatever, that I was, this might sound bad, but good, I was always giving of myself, to where people started abusing my willingness to help out, to do. And I remember like 15, 16, I realized like I'm being too nice. And I'm a Pisces, so I have that, like the yin and the yang, both sides, do me wrong too many times that I cut you off. And it became around my 15, 16-year-old age when I was being asked to, hey, Jared, help lift this. Jared, do that. Jared, do this. And I would always say, yes, no problem, because I'm a team player. If it has to get done, I'm willing to get it done. But it started realizing that I was the only person they were asking to do things, until I started saying no. Being self-aware of my own abilities to be like, I don't mind doing the work, but don't just come to me to do it. If I'm willing to do it, you'll know, because I'll tell you, sure, I got it, no problem. But if you only come to me, that's like being abused of my generosity. And I started saying no. And people was like, oh, don't ask him all the time. And then honestly, I was like a section leader and drum major and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, I didn't mind putting in that effort to lead and say, yes, I will do. I love doing dishes at nighttime. We had camps. I didn't mind doing the dishes. It was my solitude. I'm an introvert anyway. So it was me just in my own head about the day and just cleaning dishes. But I was definitely self-aware at a young age of, do not take my kindness for weakness. And I realized that a long time ago. And I'm glad I did, because it has benefited me in many ways to know when no is acceptable or okay to say no, but not like, oh, I'm a butthole. Be like, no, you can't. I can't. No, I'm not doing that. It was just like, okay, I'm not. You don't ask me no more. I'm only doing this last more thing, and then I'm done. I've done my quota. Don't ask me anymore. Like, okay, I understand, respect you, and that was really me taking on that responsibility to be self-aware about my own space, my own mental space, and not being abused. Abused by.
Yes, you're setting a boundary. You're setting this thing. But what's funny is you're talking about this, and all I'm thinking about is the people that are asking you to do these things, and the lack of self-awareness that they have in order to see that they are asking all of these things of you because you'll do it. And they're not recognizing within themselves that maybe that should be spread amongst many people. Right. And so that what's happening is we're seeing that snowball effect because that affected you. Right. And then you were able to say, okay, boundary. No, because this is my space. This is what I need from you. And you're stating that, but you're creating that sense of awareness within the space, probably to the older people who are like, I just asked you to do something. And you're like, but you always ask me. So how about you kind of go in and figure out why? And it's not because you don't want to ask somebody else. It's just because it's so easy, because you'll know I'll do it. And that's not fair. And that's not fair to you. But thank God that you kind of figured out that moment in terms of like, this is what they're doing, and I'm fully aware of what they're doing. I just need to make sure that they know it's not okay.
No, it's not okay. Yeah, and I loved doing the work. I loved helping out. It was not a problem for me to run a bus or get some off the truck or whatever I had to do, because it's a drum corps. You're one family trying to get to a point where everything's running smoothly and you're good. But it was a point where I had to be saying no, I'm not, and just walk away. Don't question. No, I'm good. Thank you. And walk away. And they would respect that. Like, okay, we ask them a lot. And it's like I said, it became a problem, but then it became, all right, Jared, you want to be drum major? And they didn't ask me to be drum major. They told me I was drum major. They said, you're drum major. And I said, okay. Because I was willing to do the work.
Right.
So I was so aware that you're not going to run over me either.
Absolutely. And that's a great boundary. I think that what I'm seeing and what I'm recognizing within this whole process is the emotions that come with not just setting a boundary, but being able to recognize the lack of self-awareness in others. So how, like, in terms of performance, in terms of being on top of your game and being the best at what you do, like, how do these emotions affect that performance? So me coming in late and everybody's mad because, I wasn't there to clean this section that we really needed to clean. Like, there has to be an understanding from everyone that there are big emotions that go with understanding yourself. Big emotions. Because what happens, let's say that you have a major solo in a show or a major solo on stage, right? And you just, you kind of slough through it every day on a daily basis. You don't really perform it fully, but you kind of rely on yourself to be able to be there in the moment, right? I was actually that performer. I was the one up until my age out year. I was the one who was like, I'm just going to pull this off tonight because I know I can. And that was one of my gifts that I didn't have to, like, I had to work on technique and things like that. But in terms of performance, I always knew I could turn it on. But what I recognized in my last year of marching drum corps was that was the most selfish thing I could do, is because I am marching with all of these younger people. I'm about to age out. And they're looking to me as a model for how to achieve this thing and this being within performance. And the only time I'm able to model that is actually during a performance. So, like, they're not getting anything from me as a teammate. I'm withholding all of that information. And I didn't realize I was doing that until my age out year, when I just kind of had this thought of, no one is performing like me during a performance. Why is that? Well, it's because they don't know how. And it's because I'm not modeling that idea of performance, because it's not about them at this point. It was about me. And so once I started to realize that the more I put that effort into a rehearsal and performed during every single rep, like full out performance, the vibe, the energy, everything started lifting, and the talent and everything started just kind of locking in. And it was because I affected other people. And I recognize that now, and I saw that a little back then, but knowing that I was holding all of that in and not sharing it, it was just a not knowing. It wasn't intentional. It was just, I didn't realize it. I wasn't self-aware enough to recognize that my inaction was absolutely helping the fact that these performers were struggling. So I think that there's something to be said for when we as educators talk to our students about performing during rehearsals. And they're all like, yeah, performing during, especially the ones that are really, really good. I think that there's part of that where we're trying to get them to recognize that it's not just about them in that moment. It's about every single person on that floor being able to learn from that person, and that person being able to model that. I'm really fortunate that I have marched with some of the most talented people in the industry. And one that I'll always come back to is my best friend, Andrea Forch, director of Paramount. She was my captain in high school. She was my captain at drum corps. She was my captain in Winter Guard. She is one of my best friends on the planet. And I learned from her early on how to approach being a good technician with my equipment. Now, I'm telling you, I learned how. I'm not telling you that I implemented that all the time, but she was such a good model of being incredibly passionate and incredibly focused on that thing that it affected everyone around her. Everyone wanted to be as technically proficient as she was. And I really do feel like she was such a great leader for that. She wasn't the kind of leader that was telling you what to do. I mean, yeah, let's do this, let's roll our flags, like stuff like that. But it was very much a modeling. And I feel once you get to that stage in leadership where you're a servant leader and you're modeling the behavior and the things that you want to see from other people, I think that's the moment that you start to become the best teacher. I really do believe that when you start to recognize that modeling, not sitting down in front of your cast whenever you're rehearsing, or modeling being up and moving during a dance class, or just being up and around the space and not just standing in the front, you're creating moments of aha in the performers that you're teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we see that a whole lot, because I don't know that everyone recognizes how important that is.
I will absolutely agree with you 1,000%. And I say this often when people pick their captains. They don't often pick the people who will affect the group the most positively. They pick the people who they think are going to be the soloist. And I say to myself, that's the choice. But why did you pick that person just because they are, quote unquote, the best, or they're a senior, when they might not be the best role models or leaders for your organization or your color guard in this sense? Because they don't always have the information or the knowledge or self-awareness, as we talk about, to recognize that what I do does mean a huge thing to not just myself, but to everyone behind me and for future people behind me. And sometimes that, like you said, your best friend gives information, you didn't always utilize it, but you still have that knowledge of what a certain person role model looks like. So you could always let me turn, what would so-and-so do right now in situation? That's the best choice. Let's make the best choice for the group versus let's make the best choice for me at this moment, which is being on my phone or getting water or complaining or whatever that situation might be. It's like, no, I'm not going to sit down when we have to, get a break. I know we have to make sure that everybody's on time. I know I have to make sure that everyone is actually fed today and they have their nutrition. They're not just eating junk food because I want to eat junk food and I'm picking down, chips and candy and ice cream during lunch breaks. And I should be eating probably better feel food for my body, so that I can actually create this work of art and not be out with a stomach ache for later, or have digestive problems, or be tired and like, oh, I'm so sick and tired. I can't, but now I'm cranky because I didn't fuel my body correctly. So yeah, there's a lot of that going around, and I agree.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. I think too, our younger students are finding this false sense of awareness from social media. And the false self-awareness aspect comes from the fact that they want to control how people perceive them, rather than being like, growing up, I didn't like, it's really funny. So I was talking to, who was it? I don't know. I talked to a lot of people, but I was, I was at a high school 2 weeks ago, and I was instructional coaching a dance educator in Houston. And she asked me to sit down and talk with her class because I've been watching them. I was there like throughout the year giving her feedback, but she wanted me to talk to them and give them feedback as well. And I talked to them a lot about my upbringing and how I came into what I do now. And one of the girls said, do you have any videos of you dancing? And I was like, no. And she was like, nobody recorded? I'm like, do you think that everybody in the audience would have like these shoulder handheld VCR cameras? Like, but that's the thing is like that there's such this disconnect in why don't you have any videos, or why didn't you get these really cool action shots from Jalesh, right? Like there's not this awareness of what happened before. There's only an awareness of what's happening through our phones and digitally. So in terms of teenagers at this point in life, the idea of self-awareness, they think they can look at it on a phone. They think that they can look at it on the internet. But what they're not recognizing is they have a lack of self-awareness in the present. So when they're actually present and there's no technology involved, they don't understand how to behave. You want to talk about self-awareness? Let's talk about talking on your phone on speaker in a public space. Right? Because that's affecting other people. If you don't have earbuds in, or if you're watching a TikTok video in a public space and everybody else can hear it and it's really loud, there are so many people that don't recognize that is something that, that personally, that drives me nuts, because for me, it's a lack of self-awareness that you're affecting all of these other people and you're not taking it upon yourself to be like, hey, you know what? This probably bothers people. Or, hey, you know what? This phone call should probably be private. I think that there's that coming in. And then what happens is people get angry. People get so angry and they lash out. Well, they're getting angry because somebody wasn't self-aware enough to make sure that their headphones were on and they could only hear their content. But then this person's getting angry, but they're not self-aware enough to be like, oh my God, I'm getting angry because of this, this, and this, and this. They just get angry. So it's all like this trickle down effect. And honestly, the self-awareness thing could go for like, I could do like a novel on it, because there's so many instances that we don't think of that are actually teachable moments. And unfortunately, there are not a lot of opportunities just in the general public for these teachable moments. So that's why I kind of come back to teaching adolescents, because if we can put that out there for them and be able to model that behavior, or be able to, make sure they understand how they show up in the world affects every single person that they come in contact with and people they don't come in contact with. And I really do think that that's something that we need to start pushing a little bit more in the activity, specifically competitive color guard, competitive marching band, competitive drum corps. How you show up on a daily basis is not your social media. It's you in that moment. It's how you show up. It's how hard you work, right? And how you show up to a competition. What does that look like when somebody says something mean and it affects other people? There has to be this sense of, and I don't even think it's a sense of regulation. I think it's just a sense of saying, hey, I can affect this other person just by making a face, or just by talking through their ballad, and yeah, there's some respect issues there, but just being aware enough to know that action, that lack of self-awareness, or the ignorance and the ignoring of self-awareness, that can hurt. That can hurt some folks, and that can take a whole team down.
Yeah. I often think when it comes to self-awareness is respect of self and respect of others. At the same time, when you're in an environment that, you people always want respect. And, when you're not thinking about respecting yourself, respecting others, you make choices that might not be the best. And I think about drum corps now, because there's move-ins happening and there's 140, 150 people, young adults. And then you have staff of 60 people. That's a lot of people in one space trying to understand their place in this 100, 200 people cog wheel going down the road each day for the next 3 months. And if you're not bringing that kind of self-awareness to your environment, it could have catastrophic effects for everyone involved. And what kind of advice would you have to someone who is going into move-ins, going into drum corps maybe for the first time, who has never been in an environment where there are 200 people that now are looking directly at you to do your job, to pull your weight, and to be self-aware of your responsibilities in this space and how it affects everybody? What kind of advice would you give somebody like that?
The first thing that came to my mind was journal. Journaling at the end of every day, because it's not going to happen immediately. You're not immediately going to go into this mindset of self-awareness. Like when you start creating and writing down what happened to you in the day, what state you're in, physically, like geographically, like, hey, we're in Iowa today and this happened and this happened and this happened. And you write all those things out. Well, once you write all those things out, they're still like just kind of resonating in your body and resonating in your head. And oftentimes you don't just put the journal down, you keep thinking about it. And I think those thoughts and being able to see what you wrote down on paper and every single thing that you write, how did this affect somebody else? I think is huge. So rather than just looking at it and saying, this is what I did today, and this was funny, or this wasn't cool, or whatever, now take it a step further and dig a little deeper and see if you could have done something differently to affect the outcome. Could I have done this? Could I have helped with this? I think that there are so many points in our lives where we have those moments of realization that just the drum corps thing for me, like I could have helped so many more people if I had just performed and put it all out there every single day on the practice field and not just hold it to myself for performance. Like I could have done that. And looking back, I want to just smack myself upside the head and be like, dude, but again, in that time, we weren't really like, that wasn't really pushed on us. And that wasn't everybody called you selfish. Oh, you're selfish for doing that. You're selfish for, okay. But what that actually boiled down to was me not being self-aware enough to understand the impact I could have had on others or did have on others. So I do think that the journaling process is the first place to start.
That's really good, because I do recall, oops, I'm not ashamed of it. There were times when I marched senior corps, and I was a little bit older than most people out there, and I was an ailing body has to, rest every once in a while. Mm-hmm. So there were times where maybe I sat out a rep or two. Maybe sat out a rep or two. And maybe people got mad. And maybe they talked about me behind my back. And maybe I didn't care. And I can't say I did care now. But it definitely affected people's thoughts of me forever. People today will still be like, I remember when you sat out and I still hate you for it. No matter what the cause was, no matter what I was feeling, I had bad knees, bad ankles. My body was 30 years old, and they were 20. It's still, as a quote unquote role model of sorts in that activity, I was looked upon as being the person who wasn't for the team. No matter how hard I went when I was in my reps, all they saw was me sitting out, because when I'm running my reps, they don't know how hard I'm going because they're doing their own reps. So I totally get where you're like, yeah, if I would have gone back and thought about me going harder to show people that this is what you do, maybe someone else could be like, you know what, that's a role model I'm going to take, going hard and pushing to limit whatever I have to. Granted, if they wanted me to finish the season, I had to sit out because I did my part. And the horn line was coming in and out, and I was like, I'm not doing this for the horn line 30,000 times. It's raining out here. Why am I doing this for the horn line? I do my parts. I've been out here every single day for the last 3 months doing this every weekend. But I understand now, as a more mature, more self-aware, how that affected people's take on me and the take on the experience as a whole for the whole season. And I wish I could take that part back, but I'm glad I'm walking. And I had a great time doing drum corps as a senior age, because if it wasn't for that, I would have no exercise at all and no community, no family. But yeah, and I definitely did it more than once. Each year I marched after a certain year. I was like, I'm not running as a skate rep again. My body's going to tell me no in a second. You'd be mad there's a hole out here because I can't fill it. So, but yeah, I definitely understand how that could affect other people's response to me, of me saying, hey, we got to do this, like, whatever. And it's like, well, hey, what are you talking about? I'm trying to make sure you're good. Yeah, I bet you are. You know, it's those kind of ideas where it's like, yeah, maybe I was, in their person's mind, not a team player. So yeah,
right.
I totally get that.
But I do think that there's ways that could have shifted. So like for me, when I work with like dancers, and let's say they have an injury, right? So especially in the high school, like public school, high school dances, like everybody's like, my knee hurts, right? And then they're like, I'm just going to sit out today. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're actually going to sit in this chair because your upper body still moves. And you're going to sit literally in the front corner of the class. You're going to sit and you're going to do all of the upper body. All of it. You're going to stay engaged in class. We're going to do all of this together. You're going to take all of these things, whatever. But it's knowing that if I allow that kiddo to sit and watch class, they're going to be on their phone.
Yeah.
They're going to be completely distracted. They're not going to be engaged. And so recognizing they get mad because they just don't want to do anything. And I know that, like I was that kid. So, but I think that there is this big, huge part of it is saying maybe meet somewhere in the middle. Right. So for me, the meeting in the middle is you can sit in a chair, but I need you to be engaged with your upper body. Right. Or I went to university late to get my dance degree. I was in my 30s and I was performing in a duet that I was really excited to perform in. And it was a difficult piece. Mainly because I was in my 30s and the girl that choreographed it was like early 20s. And the piece had this component to it where you were always having to come off center and then catch yourself, right? And that's a big part of my practice is recognizing how far you can push and blah, 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 blah. One of those rehearsals, I did one of those things that was off center and I couldn't catch myself. Like I couldn't, I wasn't falling the correct way. Backtrack, at that university, Texas Women's University, there was a big effort and there was a big push to learn how to fall, right? So they taught you, that was part of the curriculum was you learn how to fall because a lot of the stuff we did was off center. And if you didn't fall properly, you would be injured. So I fell and I put my hands out in front of me because I was going forward. And I knew that if I didn't put my hands out, that I was going to hit like my full face because it was going quick. Usually you're just supposed to pull your elbows and knees in and roll. I didn't. My hands hit. I yanked my head up so that it didn't hit the floor. But my feet came over behind me and like, I'm not kidding you, like hit my head. Like, it was like that. It was bad. It was bad. So I got up and I was like, whoa. And she was like, oh my God, that looked awful. Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And whatever. By the end of that rehearsal, I had no mobility in my neck, like none. I couldn't move my shoulders. and I essentially had whiplash. So I went to the ER. They gave me one of those glorious freaking things for your neck. And they're like, you really can't do a whole lot for the next week. I had class the next day. So I showed up to my class wearing a neck brace. And I already knew that you didn't sit down in class. So I stood in the back and did all of the lower body. And that was one of the first moments that I recognized and realized why particularly that dance program has that policy of the injury and, whatever you do, you have to stay engaged in class. Mm-hmm. But it was because when you walk in and you determined that you cannot participate in any way, immediately the other people in class begin to judge. And they begin to look at you differently, and the vibe changes and the energy changes. Whereas if you come in and you do upper body or lower body, all of a sudden it's like, oh, she's here. She's in it. She's like, that's an inspiration. That's what I want to do. Right. And so that is, I think, a great way to look at teaching our young people that it's not just about persevering through this really hard injury. It's about doing what you can and not allowing the defeat to take you out. And I think that is a huge lesson in terms of self-awareness is I may not be able to do this, but what can I do? Because especially when you're on a team, it's huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is because, like people say, it's optics at this point, and people see what they want to see and judge you based on what they see, not necessarily what they know. But if you give them a reason to appreciate your efforts, then they will respect you that much more.
Right. And it wasn't ever about like, oh, look at me, I'm in the back and I'm just doing lower body, right? It was me attending class because A, I'm in college, and B, I have to keep this up. I'm 32 years old at that point. These 18-year-olds that I'm dancing with who are far more talented than I was, they don't see it that way. And again, it really does. Self-awareness comes down to this understanding of maturity. But I think that it has to start with the leaders of the people that are in front of our students.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of those points where just because you are older than someone or you have more experience life-wise doesn't mean you are holier than thou when it comes to you knowing yourself and how the things that you do affect you. And I think that's even more obvious, I should say, when we start hearing conversations around this activity about instructors who are just horrible people, who are mean, disrespectful, treat people like crap, and then they wonder why people talk about them and quit programs, and then all of a sudden the program is folded because they have created a huge red flag on the entire program, and now they're getting calls to whoever, whatever, and now you have to have a conversation with somebody who's a grown-ass person. But yet they never understood that their actions is not always the best, no matter how old you.
Absolutely. And I think that in terms of that, again, our younger generation of instructors, at that point, when we're all in our 20s and we're just coming out of emergent drum corps, right? And we're going into teaching, it's never about the kid. It's always about us as the younger teacher. And this is my vision. And this is what I want it to look like. And this is about them. It's not about the kid. And as you grow and you become more aware of the reasoning that you're doing everything you're doing, it's because you love the activity and it gave you so much and you want to give that to somebody else. But you don't know at that time, how. And you don't know at that time that every single thing that you do and how you run rehearsals, how you speak to parents, how you speak to kids, the way that you look at somebody affects them. And that is the ultimate understanding of self, is when you can self-regulate. You know, I'm not sitting here telling you that I loved every, student that I've ever taught or every person I marched with. I had a deep respect for every single person I marched with, but it doesn't mean that we're all best friends. And I think as a teacher going into it later in high school, and teaching high school, I do think that there's a sense of giving the understanding to the kids that you're teaching that being self-aware as an adult means admitting mistakes. It means saying you were wrong. It means saying, I'm not the end all be all on this, but I'm going to give you the most information I can, and saying that you're not the end all be all, and saying there are other methods. This is just my choice on how to teach, rather than saying, this is how it is all the time, everywhere. And this is how we're doing it. Like, that doesn't help you grow as an educator, and it's not helping your students see beyond you. And our goal as educators should always, always be to see beyond us. They should be seeing everything, being able to see it for what it is, to appreciate it. Maybe you don't like something. That's fine. But you can at least appreciate what it is and the effort that it took. So that is big for me. And I really do feel a lot of my passion for the understanding of all of this comes from the learned experiences I've had as a high school teacher.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because I often say, there's no way I love everybody who I march with, because that'd be a lie. But I definitely in longer years, I had a lot of animosity towards certain people because of the way that they weren't self-aware of how they talked to people, or how they acted towards certain people, or how they got along with certain people. And it affected the group's camaraderie and all that stuff. But, it became clear that not everyone has the level of growth of other people, no matter how long you've been in the activity. And it does affect your future relationships with people. So there's people who I would never talk to again, who I marched with. I'm like, yeah, that was cute. But the way that you treated, you weren't self-aware of a lot of things you were doing that then made me or other people feel like you didn't care, or that you thought you were better than everybody else, so you didn't have to do the work, or that you were so buddy-buddy with the staff members that you could do anything you wanted to do. And even for the older people, the staff members weren't self-aware that they were projecting that energy out to everybody else because of that person that they gave that special treatment to, or looked at as a little bit better than everybody else. When we're all paying our money to do this activity, we're all giving our time and effort, and that response to that one person not being aware of what's going on as a whole, because you're like, yeah, this person is going to give me the result that I want, which is a gold medal or a championship medal or whatever. Meanwhile, people in the corner are the ones who need more attention, and not just to say they're the bad people in the corner, put them in the corner. It's like, no, they're talented. Just got to bring the talent out of them, pull it out of them to make sure that everyone shines equally, because they're all paying the money to produce this product. And if that person in the back corner is not pulling their weight or whatever, they don't understand, then the whole product is going to suffer. But a lot of times, like you said, we're always focused on the me part of it and not the we part of it. And that does, affect everybody's ability to progress.
Absolutely. I think in terms of being a teacher and getting your students to understand their effect on other people, I think in the past, and honestly, like, I haven't seen it done now, but it's literally having a conversation and asking questions of, hey, and not saying, why are you doing this? What do you even know? Blah, 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 blah. Like, it's sitting down and in a moment that's not anywhere near maybe the incident or whatever you had, is sitting down and asking and having dialogue about why they did that or what that choice was, and being able to say in a very matter of fact and not emotional way, is ask questions and kind of give, hey, do you recognize that this wasn't good for everyone else? And do you recognize that the thing that you did or the thing that you didn't do, that's affecting people negatively? And then you have usually, you have the kid that's like, right? And they have their like response. But then you have to say, okay, why are you responding like that? And it becomes because they're hurt that they got called out. Okay, great. You can name that. I'm embarrassed. I'm hurt that I got called out. But my main point is not to call you out. My main point is to help you see. My main point is to guide you to your own conclusion of why this was a negative thing or why this was whatever. But especially in terms of the pageantry activity, we love to just be like, nope, not helping you. You're out. Like it's so easy and it's so, I don't want to say convoluted, but I think that it's so prevalent because we don't want to take the time.
Yes.
And I think that we have to take the time. I think that we have to take the time to be able to connect with our students on that basis where you're not just teaching them pageantry, you're teaching them life skills.
Absolutely. Especially when you have staff of 15 people. Someone has to think, okay, let me, be the person who makes sure that this is being taken care of so that it doesn't affect the whole entire group negatively and causes a ripple effect of, well, they're not doing so why do I have to do so? Or, just breeding that energy you don't need in the community of color guard, especially color guard people who, like I said, you're paying your money to do this. It's not like, when you're doing sports that you pay $200 to do, like, great, you got some pads and some football gear and some basketball. No. This is, you're sleeping at people's houses all weekend. You are eating, sleeping, living with people for long periods of time. And you need to work your situations out as not just as color guard people, but just as people to understand maybe the things that I need to be addressing should be addressed in this kind of manner versus what I'm used to because I was taught this way. Maybe I should think about how I would want to be talked to or how I would feel like I would want to be talked to in this period of time in my life, not when I was young and getting yelled at. And because I didn't like getting yelled at either, or people around me getting yelled at. Like, I hate when you're getting yelled at. Like, I hate people yelling at you. Let's figure out why you're getting yelled at so that doesn't happen anymore. But, that's, again, a level of self-awareness that some people have, maturity, some people might call it. And it's something that you learn, hopefully, or you're taught.
100%. And that's the hope, right? The hope is that there's some effort being made in terms of that understanding of self from that leader's position. And again, I'm so grateful that you're bringing this webinar series out because I think it's so important, not just for our own mental health, but being able to take care of the people around us and being able to recognize when somebody is overwhelmed and doesn't know how to verbalize what they need. I just think that conversation, and some of those conversations are uncomfortable.
Yes.
And that's okay. The discomfort is where the growth lies. The discomfort is where you start to figure out, oh, this is the reason. It doesn't feel great in the moment. And you feel almost ashamed that you didn't know this thing. And just really quickly going on to that, that's why we're having a lot of students, they like when I start teaching dance, if they've never taken a dance class before, they immediately they try it once, like, I can't do this. And immediately done, they're checked out. Like it's not even like, I'm going to try that again. They're so embarrassed and ashamed that they don't know something. And because they can find out any information that they want at their fingertips, they don't know how to do something physically. All of a sudden it's this, I can't do this. I can't. Okay. It's not that. It's literally like you just have to let go of ego, and you have to let go of that you can't control the perception of the people around you as well as yourself in that moment. Like, that to me is huge in understanding where all of those feelings come from. And that's a learned self-awareness thing, is encouragement and talking to your students and saying, no, you can't do this. Yeah, you look really ridiculous right now. But you know what? That's kind of part of growing, is that understanding that you're not going to get it the first time and you're not going to be good at it when you start. But if you keep at it and you keep recognizing that within yourself, you hold the key to so many things, then all of a sudden it becomes a completely different journey for your student. Yes.
Courtney, this was a great conversation. I thank you so much. Again, self-awareness, a space for growth and recognition with Courtney Allyson Mills. Again, Courtney, I want to thank you again, but this was amazing. Hope people got a lot out of it. I know I did, especially being a new found person in mental wellness. It does. If I could look back and think back sometimes that I created my own issues within my environments and how I could have addressed things differently, knowing now what I know, it would be differently for a lot of people around me as well. And I didn't think about, I thought about them, but it was still a me situation and not a we situation. So I really thank you for explaining to many more people who maybe didn't hear this or didn't recognize it as a situation that could be addressed and should be addressed within our community and within their own lives. But now have thought, oh, maybe I can bring some self-awareness to whatever activity I'm doing or wherever I'm at in life. So I thank you so much for that.
Yeah, know better, do better,
Absolutely. And that will wrap our first part of our series here at Melanin Mosaic from Ensemble, when our Mosaic mental health series. Check us out. We have a few more things going on this week, and we'll be back very soon. Thank you again, Courtney.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.